Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly, where we discuss the latest in Israel's geopolitical developments. I'm Aaron Porras, and our guests today are Davidi Ben-Zion, the deputy head of the Shomron Regional Council, and former Knesset member Dr. Einat Wilf. Today we'll be looking at the highlights of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent trip to the United Kingdom, namely marking the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration and sharing his thoughts on the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. So working chronologically, on November 2nd, Prime Ministers Netanyahu and May delivered passionate speeches about the legacy of the Balfour Declaration after 100 years. But not everyone is celebrating. The Palestinian Authority is now again threatening to sue the British government over that letter, and pro-Palestinian activists, including British Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, are protesting and calling for action. Netanyahu responded in his speech that other Arab nations in the Middle East are coming around like Egypt and Jordan have, and that the Palestinians should take note.
It's time that the Palestinians will embrace this approach too. And if they do, they will find in Israel and in me an enthusiastic partner for building a peaceful and prosperous future for both our peoples. It's within our reach. I think it's getting closer.
Indeed, Balfour wrote explicitly that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. So when some people suggest we should apologize for this letter, I say absolutely not.
So the Balfour Declaration is a promise. It's a non-binding statement. Why is this non-binding statement the point of contention for the Palestinian Authority? Dr. Wilf, I'm going to start with you.
It's a point of contention because they repeatedly misunderstand how the State of Israel came about. The State of Israel came about due to Jewish action. It is what the Jews did, what the Zionist movement did, but this is something that is still very difficult to quite a few people to absorb. The fact that as a result of Zionism, the Jewish people became a people who started to be masters of their fate, who took action, and who created things. The Balfour Declaration, like you said, was a kind of letter which basically said, guys, we like the idea, we'll do our best to help. Okay. Normally, that would not be considered much. The only reason that anything happened was because the Zionist movement took action to make sure that the Balfour Declaration became part of international commitments to do things on the ground. So the Palestinians, when they attack it, they think that by attacking it, they can somehow roll back Israel. They have a vision that says, before Balfour, everything was great. Before those damn Zionists started coming.
That's what I wanted to get into. You know, wouldn't it then be completely symbolic to rescind the Balfour Declaration? What would the practical applications of that, rescinding be?
There's no rescinding. There's no apologies. It's part of the way they're waging their campaign. The campaign to show Israel as an illegitimate presence, as a foreign presence in their midst, is done by a whole variety of ways. And one of them is to say Britain should apologize. When you talk about Britain apologizing, what you're basically implying is that the colonial power should apologize for a colonial act. The implication being Israel and Zionism are a colonial presence in our midst, one that should be erased, one that should be rolled back, like all colonial presences. And of course, like everything else, it demonstrates again that the Palestinians don't get that Israel came into being not as a result of foreign handouts, but actually as a result of Jewish action. And this is the thing that they should take note of if they ever want to have a state of their own.
So I want to turn to you now, Mr. Ben-Zion. With Mr. Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn, saying that after 100 years of the Balfour Declaration, we should celebrate by giving the Palestinians a state, by offering a similar, extending that offer to them, similar to the Balfour Declaration. How would you respond to that?
First of all, I must tell that the Palestinian doesn't need to find new reason to be said or to apologize from the world, because they all the time they try to find reasons for it. Because today it's Balfour and next year it will be San Remo or something else. I mean, they always will find reason why the world need to give them their own state. Now, I think that Jeremy Corbyn have a big mistake, because the difference is that Am Israel, the Israel people, back to Eretz Israel, to the Holy Land, not just because of Balfour. First of all, it's because the Bible land. We have a source here. I mean, I came from the Samaria, from Elon Moreh. We know that the first steps of Abraham, our patriarch, was in my place, in Elon Moreh. And we know that our patriarch cover in Hebron. I mean, we have our sources. It's not like the Catalonia in Spain or somewhere else in the world that people want to build their own state. We back to Israel because it's our source here.
Looks like you wanted to respond?
Certainly. In general, what the Palestinians have now from the British is pretty much more than the Jews had from Balfour. They have the British telling them that generally they support a Palestinian state, right? That's much more than Balfour ever said to the Zionist movement. But personally, I believe that it would actually be a good idea to recognize a Palestinian state if, and very clearly, it were made clear that thereby Britain makes it clear that it no longer supports, it actually denies and rejects any Palestinian claims to return to Israel within the Green Line. Just as Britain does not support Jewish claims east of the Green Line, which I view as legitimate, they should very clearly say that they do not support Arab-Palestinian claims of return west of the Green Line. This is the only way that the idea of two states for two peoples can really come about. If they persist in their maximalist claims, there can be no peace, and those among us who persist in our maximalist claims cannot be also people who promote peace. The Jewish people need to be very clear that they do not have maximalist claims, and we have made it clear again and again since partition until today. And the Arab Palestinians have to be very clear that they renounce their maximalist claims, and they have yet to do so, and that's what Britain should do.
So going back to the Palestinian Authority's own argument, however, their main argument is that the Balfour Declaration was based on an invalid idea to begin with, the idea that British rule could hand over land to Israelites, whomever they might be, simply because at the time that the declaration was made, it was under Ottoman Turkish rule. So is there any credence to that argument? And furthermore, can they sue, if they do sue the British government, can they sue them in a foreign court, and will that court hear that argument?
The short answer to the second half is, of course, absolutely no. This is a PR stunt. The first half is Britain did not hand over anything to anyone. This is precisely the mistake or the deception they're trying to do.
So to clarify my question, the intent to hand over land that at the time was under British rule. So
it wasn't even an intent.
Under Ottoman rule.
It wasn't even an intent to hand over. And by the way, the Ottomans and the Turks supported the Balfour Declaration. They even issued a letter of their own towards the end of the war supporting Jewish sovereignty or a form of national home in the land. The basis of legitimacy for the Jewish people is indeed their historical connection and ultimately their actions in the name of liberation from imperialism, from colonialism, and from the rule of others. This is what the Palestinians either don't understand or willfully don't want to understand.
So coming back to you, and on that note, how the Palestinians also claim a religious right to the land.
Yeah, so I really appreciate my friend Dr. Wilf, but I think that the dream of Palestinians, the new Palestinian state, it's just a dream, and it's the old-fashioned news because it can't be today. Thank God we built Judea and Samaria, and we have today, it's become to be million Jewish in Judea and Samaria. So we want to live with them, we can live with them. Actually, we do it today. I mean, in my regional council, we have industrial zones, and the Palestinians work there, thousands of Palestinians, because I think that it's just a dream today, and it can't be reality.
Sorry.
And the Britain, okay.
No, please.
And I think that they just want to try to ask, I mean, to make new recuse for it, but it's just for to make V. I mean, they not really want it today.
So given the PR stunt, as Dr. Wilf called it, are you saying we should just forget about everything that they're saying, forget about these arguments, annex the West Bank, and we'll live in peace?
No, it can't be happen. I mean, we need to learn to give them their rights, to give them their human rights, to be with them. We use the same roads, we use the same industrial zones, and we need to learn how to live together. We have no any choice.
I see. Anything to add to that? Last point?
Yes, we need to live together as equals, which means people with equal political rights, not just human rights. That's a cop-out. So it has to be about political rights. Political rights should be exercised in a state of their own. Depriving people of political rights, there's no way to deliver human rights in the absence of political rights. It exists nowhere, and it will not exist here.
No, I agree for it. I agree that they need political rights, and I think that they have today, because they have their parliament. They can vote to their parliament. Of course, they can vote to their municipality council. So I think they have it today.
They obviously don't have it. They do not have control of their lives, of their ability to who exits, who enters. They do not have real control of their lives.
They can live wherever they want. They can drive.
No, they can't. Developing their cities, building houses requires our military to approve it. They cannot develop their own cities. They cannot develop their own towns.
Just if they choose the terror way.
No.
If they was
just building every house requires the approval of the Israeli military.
Well, I'm going to interject here.
No, they can't.
I'm going to interject here because unfortunately we're getting off of topic. Unfortunately, so I'm going to interject here. Unfortunately, we do have to move on. So, the day following the commemorative banquet, November 3rd, Prime Minister Netanyahu made an appearance at the Chatham House, where he first praised the Trump administration's efforts in bringing the Palestinians closer to the negotiating table, and then called Iran a nation led by militant Islamic barbarians, ideologically hell-bent on world domination.
The barbarians, so to speak, fight themselves, among themselves. The one potent force of militant Islam that has emerged is Iran. And it is devouring one nation after the other. It is doing so either by direct conquest, but more usually by using proxies. Hezbollah, they took over Lebanon. Yemen, with the Houthis, they're taking over Yemen. They're trying to do the same thing with Shiite militias in Iraq. Same thing now in Syria. They want to import tens and tens of thousands of Shiites into Syria. I fall back on Kissinger's description of Iran, which I think is apt. He said Iran is a cause, it's not a country.
So I'm going to start with you this time, Davidi. To begin, Prime Minister Netanyahu has many times stated that when he's speaking of Iran, he's speaking globally of the Iranian government and the Iranian regime and not the people. But when he makes statements so global like that about barbarians coming from Iran and their hegemonic ideologies, don't you think that that's a counterproductive message?
No, I think that, first of all, I'm proud of my Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'm really proud of him because I think that he is the front of the Western wall against the radical Islam. And I think that what Netanyahu understands, and some of the Europe Union members understand today, and maybe congressmen in the United States understand today, it's the front of the Western wall, it's Israel. And if you want to win in this war against Iran, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Houthis in Yemen, we must be strong here in Israel. And as Shomron, as Samaria Regional Council, you can say that Samaria is the front of Israel. I mean, it's the back of Israel. And I must tell you that thousands of Europe's members, that came to visit in Samaria, understand that if you want to win in this war, you must be strong here in Israel.
Sure, but what about when he's making comments about Iran and the Iranian people? Isn't the idea to maybe try and make friends? Wouldn't these comments have made more enemies than friends? I'm going to go to you, Dr. Will.
First of all, depending on what kind of friends he wants to make. One of the things that Netanyahu has been doing for quite some time now, he alluded it also to in his speech at the British dinner, is that he's making friends in the Middle East among those who are not very excited about Iran's regional ambitions. I don't know about global ones, but certainly regional ambitions. So a lot of what he's saying is actually to them. He is positing himself, I don't know about a leader of the Western world, but very much as a regional ally, someone who could be trusted on, someone who shares their views, someone who could be an ally for a whole variety of things. And those are at least friends that he is making. On occasion, he does use the opportunity to appeal to the Iranian people. This could still be considered what the Iranian government does, a certain Iranian clerical regime. I think there is an understanding among many scholars, and by the way, Kissinger didn't just say that Iran was a cause, he says Iran needs to decide if it's a country or a cause, that it has both of these elements. There's no doubt that Iran today has the most educated population, the population that in many ways is most Western-leaning as a people. So the disappearance of the regime, should it happen one day, promises to actually make Iran one of the most interesting countries in the region once, if and when this regime disappears.
So then, do you believe, because very recently we've seen reports and videos coming out of Iran burning effigies of the United States and Israeli flags and other sorts of symbols in that vein, is that, do you think, an exemplar of them moving towards the Iranian regime's ideology, or more, do you think that that's representative of the Iranian people globally, or that's just what they're showing us?
Representative it's not, and we know that, but now we have enough information, even the internet is sufficiently open that we know it's not representative. But even so, we've learned that corrupt intelligence security states can exist for decades sometimes after they lose domestic legitimacy. Once they fall, everyone says, of course, it was corrupt from within, of course it fell. But it could last for decades. No one knows when exactly that regime will fall. And I think the concern of the Israeli prime minister is that the nuclear deal was not so much about the nuclear deal, but about helping this current regime buy more time for its own survival.
All right, so moving back to Shomron, Netanyahu also spoke at Chatham House about the Trump administration's involvement in the Middle East, thinking outside of the box, he said. He quoted saying they're thinking very much outside of the box when it comes to Palestinian peace. But the United States has still never stated that they're going back to the two-state solution or the idea of a two-state solution. So what kind of examples of out-of-the-box thinking are you expecting from the United States administration, given all that information?
Actually, I guess that you need to ask Prime Minister Netanyahu what he meant. I can guess that if we remember what I talked about it before 2 minutes, today we understand that 700,000 citizens live in Judea and Samaria. You can't change it. So we need to make good life for all the neighborhoods. These neighborhoods, it's called Judea and Samaria. We can do that. We can give them, I told you, we can give them new roads. I think they want it. I must tell that I have such a negotiation between me to the governor of Samaria, of Nablus, to make new roads for all 500,000 that live in my area. I think that this is an example how we can think out of the box.
So given your connections to the people and the administrations in the West Bank, don't you think, I'll give you another example. There was a recent asking by Netanyahu to the legislative committee to postpone a vote on whether or not we should allow the returning to 4 settlements in the northern West Bank that we pulled out of in 2005.
Right, in my area.
Exactly. So how does that promote regional peace?
This 4 settlement is just for the symbolic thing. I mean, we can't. We don't want. It will be actually a new settlement in North Shomron.
They were destroyed since 2005.
Right. It's just a symbolic thing because we think that it was crime what the Prime Minister Sharon did for us before 12 years, when they threw out from the house thousands of Jewish. But if you ask me what we need to do today for the Palestinians to build them cities like that we want to build for us. I mean, today they live they have no education system, they have no industrial zone. We need to build them in new cities like in Israel, and I think that it will be the right way to the new peace.
Well, the fact is that 80% of the 650,000 settlers live in 4% of the territory adjacent to the Green Line. So not a huge success. The two-state solution is very much alive. just as they're not going anywhere and we're not going anywhere. That is pretty much the way we divide this land and how we live together. We will ultimately have to do it as political equals. Now, what needs to be done on behalf of all Western countries is to finally put an end to the Arab-Palestinian maximalist claims in the form of their demand to return into Israel within the Green Line. The world is focused on limiting Israel's maximalist claims in the form of the settlements that are not part of the 4%. That is fine and well, but it needs to use that same energy and passion and commitment and focus to make it clear to the Arab Palestinians that their dream of return into Green Line Israel, into Israel within the Green Line, is not going to happen, that it has no support and no way that they can have a state, that the only right they really have is the right to self-determination in a state of their own, like all peoples. Once they have a state, they can, like Israel, like the Jewish people, enact a law of return. But they have no right of return into the state of Israel. That is the only way you can truly stand behind the idea that two peoples will have their political right, their sovereignty, and will govern their lives.
I just want to say something about that the problem is that their education system today and the leadership, it's to kill Jewish. I mean, they teach today their teenagers to kill Jewish. This is their jihad. This is the holy things that they can do. And if we will build them a new own state, I'm sure that these states will be like Hezbollah or Hamas. It will be not Sweden or England. It will be a terror state on our roads. So I think that it's the correct thing to do. It's not to build them a new terror states. It's to give them territory and to help them to make it more good and nice.
Okay, now my final question before we move on. We've also recently heard reports of Prime Minister Hariri in Lebanon having been subjected to an assassination plot, and he is now resigning. He's now announced his resignation. He blamed, during his resignation speech, he blamed Iran and Hezbollah for working together on terror in the region. Netanyahu called this resignation a wake-up call to the world. How would you respond?
Well, in general, Lebanon is a tragedy that demonstrates what happens when a small people in the region become very greedy for land, and they don't understand that one day it will take them over. And that's what the minorities in Lebanon realized. They were greedy for greater Lebanon, and today they're a minority among the Shiites who are now fighting back with the help of Iran and have a very different vision for Lebanon. It's a true tragedy that very much I hope to avoid for the state of Israel.
I think that Lebanon is another example, bad example, what happened when we're going out from this state. Because when Ehud Barak, the last prime minister, ran away suddenly from Lebanon, he left there our friends, Tzadal, and he built a new terror state, because Hezbollah became to be the biggest political party in the parliament. And I think that Hariri is just the symptom of this strategic story. So I think that we need to be more strong. We choose the bad neighborhood here in the Middle East, and we have no choice. We must live here.
All right, well, I'll give you each now one sentence. That's really, unfortunately, all the time we have. We'll start with you for the silver lining, the good word to sum up everything that we've talked about today, but in a positive note.
The good word is that today in Israel, I saw that people like to help one each other. I was right here in Tel Aviv, and I asked someone, how can I come to here, to this place? And he took me straight to the door. I think that this is the good face, a nice face of the Israeli normal people.
It's a positive thing to finish up on.
Well, I would say that I very much want to hope that what Netanyahu said to Prime Minister May is true, that forces are beginning to shape up, that are coming close for us to make a grand agreement in the region. And when that happens, they will find in him personally a willing partner. I very much hope it's true.
Excellent. I will agree with you there. All right, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our guests, Dr. Einat Wilf and Deputy Head Davidi Ben-Zion. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. See you next week, and shalom from Israel. That was good.